can capture all for me. Awesome. Thank you. So for all of our attendees and future viewers, we are recording this and we will be able to send it out. Usually we get it ready to send out within 24 hours of close. So if you want to listen to it again or send it off for somebody who you think might have an interest in hearing some of this information, certainly feel free to send that off to them once we send out the link. So first of all, thank you all for joining us today. I am Genna Fasullo LaPeer. I am an attorney here with the Miller Elder Law Firm, and I'm going to be joined here with Norma Berger. We'll talk a little bit more about Norma in a moment and what her wealth of experience and knowledge and what we're going to talk about today. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, it's going to be independent living. So what is independent living? What are some considerations when you're thinking about possibly moving to independent living? What concerns that they can and cannot address, some of the differences between assisted living facilities. And if you determine that independent living is a good fit, what sort of things are you looking for to make sure that you find the best independent living facility for you? So that's kind of topic for today, which you knew about. Structure for today is going to be about 30 minutes of discussion, and then we'll open up the last 15 minutes for questions. So feel free to use the Q&A section of the Zoom webinar. You can just drop in questions as you have them throughout, and then we can look at addressing them at the end to make sure that, sometimes it's like you hear something, have a question, and then forget about it later. So feel free to just have a rolling question and answer drop into that box. All right, so we did indicate that it's going to be recorded, and it's being recorded now. So let's move into it. I'd love to welcome again Norma with us. And just for everybody else's information, Norma is well, first of all, she was a Gator. She graduated from the University of Florida, and she has been basically working with the aging population in Gainesville for over 15 years. She works for a company by the name of Palm Aging, and she is a certified aging life care manager. And her expertise is going to be knowledge of the community available services. And that basically allows her to, from a professional standpoint, coordinate the care needs of our seniors, their families, and find and suggest suitable places for living or care recommendations. We often rely on Norma for, to get our information and get some community resource knowledge, because we always want to know what's up and coming, and she has the latest and greatest on pretty much everything when it comes to community placement and caregiving support. So without further ado, I'm going to throw it to you first, Norma. Let's talk about just generally, when you're meeting a family or a couple or a person, what are some of the considerations or what is the criteria where you're thinking this person might be suitable for independent living?
Sure. Thanks, Jenna. And thank you for having me. Nice to see everyone. um, so, independent living is in a community where they would provide certain services like maybe meals, activities, limited housekeeping, things like that. So, if you're considering moving into one of these communities from your own home, some of the considerations might be, the environment in your home, whether it's completely safe for you, whether you've started to not want to do all the maintenance involved, care for your home. Maybe you're living by yourself and you want to be around more people. Those types of things are considerations of when it may be time to consider independent living. As far as whether you meet the criteria to move there or are appropriate to live in independent living, it is truly still independent living. So your needs for care or things like somebody to manage your medications, things like that, you have to be independent still to live there.
So we're probably not going to be suggesting to somebody, in a with a chronic condition that's, well into that condition and needing basically some support in the activities of daily living. That's probably not going to be a great fit.
Well, it would depend. I
Okay.
mean, it depends, if it's a couple, for example, and one is more independent and is still taking care of the other, then maybe. But I mean, it really depends on the situation. But in
How
most cases, I would agree with you.
how does independent living differ from assisted living? Because I feel like a lot of times when we meet with clients or families, it's like they muddy all the different types of living situations into one. And it's like I'm leaving my home and I'm going to a facility and there is no in between.
Right. And there is the the demarcation between assisted living and independent living is in assisted living, they provide some healthcare support. They will provide some assistance with personal care, with medication management. They have a nurse usually on site, those types of things. Um, Independent living, there's still a kind of a wide variety from like, you know, a lot of different services all the way to minimal services in different communities. However, in general, they do provide some limited support, which would be considered amenities or services, right? So they will help with housekeeping on a limited basis. They typically provide a meal plan of some kind, so you might not have to cook as much. Um, they provide a lot of activities, outings. They might provide transportation via a bus system or even, cars that take you to doctor's appointments and things like that. But they would be considered non-medical or non-healthcare related, and they don't provide like a caregiver who comes to you and helps you with things. It's much more general services or provided by the community.
When we were talking earlier, we talked a little bit even just about a difference in liability. Uh,
Hmm.
so what is that difference between
Right.
assisted living and independent living?
Right. So if you live in independent living, it is just like living at your own home as far as the responsibility for your own health. Whereas if you're living in an assisted living facility or even a higher level of care, then they have a certain level of responsibility for your safety and for your well being.
Right. So if, you know, somebody falls in
Hmm.
independent living, unless it's just by happenstance that somebody comes by, really no one's going to be there as a just proactive person checking in. This is
Correct.
just like the four walls of the house that you currently live at.
Exactly. There are some independent living communities that include in their services a like personal emergency response system or something like that so that you
Mhm.
can call for help. Um, but again, you are still responsible for doing so. It's not that there is a CNA who's coming by to check on you, twice a day or whatever, however much it is. They don't provide that.
So let's say hypothetically, we've now, deciphered or determined that, independent living is going to be at least something that we want to explore further. We think that's an appropriate fit given the circumstances. Let's go into some of our slides now to look at what kind of criteria we should be looking at and should be considering when visiting some of these independent living communities. So this is perfect. So Norma is gonna direct us first. Let's I mean, and it really comes down to, when you talk about independent living, like let's break it down. Like what is the space that we're living in? What are the amenities and services that we're talking about? What are the cost concerns associated? So I feel like sometimes when you go through more of the specifics, it you can better I conceptualize exactly
You can
what
picture it. Yeah,
exactly,
exactly.
exactly.
Mhm.
All right, so let's talk about living spaces.
So when you're first, exploring the idea of moving into an independent living, um, I would suggest seeing what's available in the area where you want to live. I mean, it might be that you want to live somewhere local, or maybe you're moving somewhere else to be near your children or family member, something like that. But it's important to know what you're getting for your money, right? Because it is usually, typically, more expensive than staying in your house. Just talking about the nuts and bolts of what's included. So, what types of homes are available? Is it a rental community or is it a
Let,
buy-in
let's
community?
talk about types of homes for a minute. Like what is the range here?
Sure.
What are the possibilities?
So, all the way from studio apartment all the way to full houses, cottages, one bedrooms, two bedrooms, three bedrooms, what depending on what you're looking for.
So really a diverse range of
Yeah.
possibility here,
And different
depending on the,
communities have different things. There are independent living apartment buildings where their options might be studios and one bedrooms. Some might have, one and two bedrooms only. And then there might be like bigger communities that have a wide range, um, such as they have cottages and they have apartment buildings, and those apartment buildings have, various floor plans. So,
just, when we're talking to clients and this is, in the cards for them, given their care and other circumstances, I always like to underscore, it doesn't have to mean that you're living in a teeny tiny box necessarily. That may be appropriate and that may be what you want, but depending on the community that you're visiting, you really have so many options. It is not just, a one and done, like you're in one little tiny room. I mean, it could be,
yeah. There
but
are places that have, small spaces. I mean, depending on where you live, um, and of course, the cost considerations. The bigger home you're getting, probably the more you'll be paying for it, right? I mean, that's typical.
right.
Um, so I would, ask what all is included in the rent. A lot of places will include internet, electricity, all, light housekeeping. Typically, when I say housekeeping, it's not like every day. It's more like a couple of times a week. They'll come vacuum and do the hard stuff, and then you're on your own for the daily upkeep. Um, but they'll usually take out trash sometimes, things like that. How many meals are offered? Some places give 3 meals a day. Others, it's more like a plan where you decide what your meal budget is, so to speak, and you have access to their dining areas. So it
Mhm.
really, really depends. Their amenities, activities. Some communities are large and have a lot of diverse activities. Some communities are smaller and have, just a few things per day.
So,
Um,
and that's a good point because I think also when you're trying to determine like what is a good fit, what is appropriate, you know, care considerations are just one element. If everybody
oh
is
yeah.
very active and very social, the availability of some of the amenities of the activities of the pools of the gyms, like that's going to be more important to
Mhm.
some, whereas other people may not,
Right.
have an interest in
Yeah,
that as much.
it's absolutely based on your personality and what kind of community you want to live in. Do you want to be in a place where you go to a lot of activities and meet a lot of new people and you're very social? That it may be a good idea, but keep in mind in independent living, nobody's going to force you to do anything.
Mhm.
So even if all of those activities are available, if you're a hermit, you can stay in your house. It's fine.
Exactly.
Um, yeah.
All right. Let's talk maybe a little bit of a deeper dive onto some of the amenities and services. We kind of touched on them already, but I think that's in your next slide.
Here, go next.
There we go.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was basically here what we were already kind of speaking to. I think,
Mhm.
one, and I guess we actually will end up going into cost a little bit later, but if the idea and the reason for moving is to simplify life a little bit, um, it may be very important to see how much of this can be in a one cost, one bill deal so that you're not dealing with the bill
Yeah.
for like a car insurance necessarily, or a utility bill, or a gym bill, or membership fee. I do what the one question that I always have is regarding transportation, because it's always, an area of concern. Um, would you say that in your experience, most of them do include transportation, or is it really a crapshoot?
It depends on the size of the community somewhat. Large communities typically do provide some level of transportation, whether that's they have like a bus that, goes to Publix once a week, any grocery store, whatever. um, or, they have a day that, they take people to appointments and such. They usually have like a van or something like that, or a
Mhm.
shuttle kind of service. How often it might be running really depends on the community. Um, and so it can be limited or it can be extensive. And that's a question to ask. And how much does it cost? Is it included in your rent or is it extra? Or how many trips are included in your rent? Or, is it once a week you get to go somewhere? That kind of thing.
Because
And
I
keep in
presume
mind,
it, sorry,
oh,
presumably you're keeping all of your same, primary care physicians, specialists, all of that, because that is not something that, unlike when you go to an ALF or even skilled nursing at a higher level, the doctors are gonna, for the most part,
mm,
come to you in a lot of those scenarios. Not all of them, but a lot of them. But here, that's not happening. Your life, your physicians, all of that is going to remain intact.
usually, yes. So depending on again the size of the community, they might have providers that have offices right inside the community.
Um,
So it may be the provider you already see, or it may be that you would consider switching, but there's no one who's going to tell you you need to. Whereas when you move, well, even if you move to assisted living, you can keep your own providers, but that's a whole other conversation. They typically do want you to use someone who's in house or contracted with them if you're at that level. But there are independent living communities that also have some medical providers on site or co-located with. They're independent usually from the community. They're not employed by the community. It's usually that they're renting space and they have that
but that's it, like it's
service.
a discussion point. It's a point of consideration, like
Yes.
who is available, how often are they available? Are you comfortable with moving, or do you need to ensure really that either you are able to continue to drive or that they have transportation available because you really, love and
Really attached to your
trust
care. Yeah,
exactly
absolutely.
love
Absolutely.
your team in place, and that's perfectly fine. But I
Yeah.
just think that's one of one of
It's a
those
key
primary
question.
discussion points
Hmm.
at the outset, so what is life going to look like when you go in. How does it change, or does it need to change at all?
Right.
um so anyways, I always think that that's,
Yeah.
doctor's appointments, getting there, and then whether or not you need to change
Yeah.
is always a tipping point.
And
Is
then
there
keep in mind,
Yeah, go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead. A lot of times when people move into independent living, they are still driving. But somewhere along the way, while they're aging, you might have to stop driving for a variety of reasons. So it's still a consideration, even if you are still driving.
So that was actually gonna be my next question
Hmm.
for you. So say you go into a independent living right now,
Hmm.
and 5 years down the road, needs begin to change and shift.
Hmm.
Is there an opportunity to bring in care providers, like privately paid caregivers, into independent living to kind of stretch that out?
Absolutely. And some communities actually have their own home care providers on site as well. Or not their own, but somebody that they partner with or whatever. And that is also another opportunity to bring in someone like an aging life care manager to help find those services, coordinate those services, maybe help you age in place longer in the independent living instead of, having to move to the next level of care, which is a whole other discussion once you get there.
What are some, so without launching into too far down the road, but we've talked a lot about what gets you into independent living, but
Mhm.
what are some of the things that get you out of
Mm,
independent living?
very good question. Um, Cognitive issues where you're not able to manage your own healthcare, medications, things like that. It could be physical limitations. Now, if you can live in independent living and have a walker or even a wheelchair if that's what you typically use, but you still have to be independent in managing it. So if you get to a point where you need help getting in and out of the shower, you need help getting dressed, you can't manage your daily personal care yourself, that's when you think about either bringing in care or considering moving into assisted living.
Absolutely makes sense. So now let's shift to cost for a minute, which I think is your next one.
Yeah.
Um, okay. So first of all, let's talk about that first bullet point because that's quite a
Mhm.
lot there.
Mhm.
Um, Community rental, CCRC, what are those?
So, a CCRC is a continuing care retirement community. So, it's typically a large campus type community that has independent living, assisted living, possibly memory support communities, and maybe even a skilled nursing facility on site. So, you want to look at when you're looking at those larger communities, is it one of those? And if it is, do they have a cost to move in the first place? Some
There's
communities,
only one in Gainesville,
yes.
right?
There's one
So
in Gainesville, and they have a very large buy-in cost. Yeah.
So understanding that not all of our clients are necessarily local to Gainesville, but Oak Hammock
Mhm.
would be the example locally of a
Yeah.
CCRC.
Correct.
And yes, Norma's right. Big buy-in up front, but basically if you're in,
You're in
they
for
can
good.
meet, yeah, they can meet you at any level of care that you have. And their, campus is really a campus. It's massive.
Exactly. Mhm.
Okay. But yeah, so that one, and there's a ton of ways to buy into that one, a lot
Mhm.
of different contracts. I feel like
Mhm.
even just deciphering which one of those is right for you, if that's a community you want to consider,
Mhm.
um, definitely get professional input and support in determining which contract is going to fit you and your financial needs and your future needs the best because they're very different. They're fairly complex.
Yes.
And to get some guidance in the beginning is going to be crucial.
I agree 100%. Absolutely.
So that versus a community rental, what
Mhm.
is that?
Yeah, and a rental community is a local example would be the village or the atrium where you are basically signing a lease, and you do have some upfront costs, deposits, first last maybe, and they have, a move out notice policy where you have to give them a couple of months notice to move, but it's essentially you're you're on a rental lease and you're able to get out of it too.
Yes. Yes. Are there really any other type of cost structure that you've seen, or is it primarily those two?
In this area, those are the primary types. There in other areas, there are like condo communities that are independent living, and the homeowners association takes care of all of the services and amenities and things like that. So it's a different type to look at, but that also exists for sure.
Interesting. Um, Now, the other thing that I want, well, actually, no, we're going to go to future care needs in a second. Um, Pets, because
Mm,
that's a big one. When
yes.
you're trying to determine if independent living is the right next move, part of it is keeping your life intact, like we already previously
Yeah.
discussed, even just with practitioners or physicians or what have you. Um, are pets normally allowed, or is that really also
It's
depends on the community.
it varies by community. And I mean, I would say for the most part, pets are allowed, but they may have restrictions as to how many, how big, what breeds,
Hmm.
and they may have additional deposits or additional fees associated with having a pet or two pets or whatever. They may allow, cats and dogs, but not birds and lizards. It just
Yeah, very, very good
it's
point.
definitely a question to ask. If you have pets, those are really important questions when you're looking at communities.
What, and so, which this next one is very interesting to me. Are there independent living communities that allow for overnight guests?
Yes, I mean certainly, like if you have a family member visiting or something like that, yeah. But there might be restrictions on how long they can stay, because they don't want people moving in with you. That's yeah.
But there's no, I would imagine, sometimes in like a rental community, like just a normal rental community, sometimes they have those guest locations that you could rent for a night. I don't know
Oh
that
yeah.
do they exist in the land of independent living?
Yes, they do like an apartment that's available for out of town guests to come and stay and rent. I know that locally yes, the independent living communities do have that, but it's fairly limited. Like they might have one or two. So it's, whoever is visiting, they might, it's first come, first serve. So
Sure. But, especially if you've got out of town family that want to come and visit, a consideration is you're probably moving from this larger home, you're downsizing, which is,
Mhm.
fine, maybe
Right.
exactly where you need to be. But one of those other considerations, if you're used to hosting a lot of people,
You might not
that
have room for your
yeah, you
guests.
may not have room there, so you might have to either check out local hotel options, or if there is a possibility of these, first come, first serve, overnight rental situations, you may need to know what, how hard is it to get that? What is the availability like? What do you need to do in advance? Just again, so you're prepared for all the
And
things
what
that
are
you are
and what's the
normally.
price? Yeah, what's the cost?
Exactly.
Mhm.
Cost, yes.
Mhm.
All right. And so let's go to future care needs now, I think, because we are actually right at 30 minutes.
Yep.
Um, and I really actually think we kind of
We touched on
already
some of this. Yeah.
touched on this for the most part. Um, the one thing I just wanted to go on here is in a scenario where you have an independent living community that also has assisted living.
Hmm.
You may have a very narrow, there may not be a lot of them, but you may have a narrow opportunity there where you might be able to do some Medicaid waiver applications if it was time to move to assisted living. Because let's be, straightforward. When we're talking about independent living, like it's your money paying for that. It's a private pay scenario. This isn't something that Medicaid's going to support or any other really government entity or grant or anything like that. This is you looking at your budget and your finances and determining whether or not that's affordable for you. And all of those extra things that we were talking about, like bringing in private care or a CMC or anything like that, like those are additional
Those
costs.
are added, yeah,
Right.
added costs. Hmm.
So I think when you're going in, you also need to ensure that there is a little bit of wiggle room for the addition of services as we age, as life continues to happen, because your ability to age in place there the longest may directly be impacted on the affordability of that. Because if we can continue to bring in care and support you to age in place, fantastic. But
Right.
at some point, that there may be a tipping point of affordability.
Yeah.
Um, so anyways, that's another question. The
Mhm.
second, if you're going into independent living, what are the costs associated on the back end for support? What do they offer? What don't they offer? Um, is there an ALF associated with possibly a med waiver opportunity? I don't know. But that's a whole other thing. So just as much as you're questioning on the entry, I think it's also important to think even a little bit beyond that on the exit as care needs continue to change and increase. Because we don't want people bopping around and moving. We want people to age in place and
If at all
thrive
possible.
for as long as
Mhm,
possible.
mhm, mhm.
Um, all right. I think, is there anything else that we missed here, Norma, in terms of any other nuggets of independent living information that we should discuss?
I do. Well, you had mentioned the Medicaid and waiver, and this is really just a local issue. Is that there aren't a lot of assisted living communities in Gainesville that will work with Medicaid. So, just as you're planning, and if you do find that you might need that Medicaid, that is an important question to ask if the community, if you're moving into assisted living, if they will accept that.
So on that note too, and I'll be try to be brief on this because I that's a whole other
Whole
webinar.
other topic. It's a
Yeah,
whole other
exactly.
webinar.
Exactly. But so when we discuss a life care plan with clients,
Mhm.
it is literally crafted to support care at any point in the spectrum.
Right.
So for example, they're year-long relationships at a time, and we may end up right here. We're going to start at independent living, but years down the road, or something, we have a crisis situation that we have to step in and change a care scenario. We'll step in and do the Medicaid planning, whether that is long-term care Medicaid or
Right.
Medicaid waiver.
Right.
And just to bear in mind, oftentimes the most thing I hear is we don't qualify.
Mm.
Yes,
I agree.
understood.
Yeah.
So that's where the attorneys end up coming in, and it's
Helping
totally,
you get qualified.
yeah, helping you get qualified, do the planning, use the lawful Medicaid exempt vehicles to park assets into and develop a plan for qualification. So that for us, it's all about care placement with our elder care coordinators, but then we also have the attorneys stepping in at any juncture to either draft documents, do a Medicaid plan, do those sorts of things. So that is a whole other consideration, but again, to keep in mind at the beginning so that there's no surprises at the end. So with that, I do see a question. So I'm gonna just read it. What are the pros and cons of a life care community as opposed to a rental community? I'm considering a life care community in New York, but I'm not sure it's worth the cost.
That's a very good question, and only you can decide if it's worth the cost for you. Um, I will say because it depends a lot on what are your upfront costs of moving in. The main benefit to a CCRC is that they provide for you at all levels of care, and they really won't kick you out. You can stay there until the end. A rental community, when your care needs change, they might have the option to say, your care needs can't be met here. Um, because we're independent living, you either have to bring on 24/7 care, or they might give you requirements for you to stay there. But a CCRC will say, well, you have this option. You can move into our skilled nursing facility. But rental communities don't necessarily have any higher levels of care. So you might just be at that point you have to move.
I
So
also think,
those are the main two differences.
yeah, I also think when you're, cost considerations, ask for your contract options,
Mhm.
review them. Because if it's anything like down here, there are so many variables about, what goes back to your beneficiaries after you have passed.
Sure.
And so sometimes there's a huge, gigantic buy-in up front, but you're like, I know that I'm going to be taken care of for the rest of my life. And I know there will still be money left to my beneficiaries if that's a
Mhm.
consideration for you. So to me, when you're evaluating all of those things, see if you can get your hands on a couple of contract options and really
And have your
truly
elder
vet
law
them.
attorney look at them.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, any other questions? I don't see any more in the question and answer box. Last opportunity for anybody to type something in or raise a hand. I think we got no open questions. So with that being said, I think we can wrap up here. This it has been recorded. We'll send you all the link tomorrow. We have another webinar coming up on March 26th on nutrition and caregiving, balancing health with responsibility. So that's going to be exciting. But thank you again so much, Norma, for taking the time out of your
Pleasure.
busy day and joining us and helping us learn a little bit more about independent living communities. So thank you so
Absolutely.
much.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Everybody else have a lovely rest of your day, and we hope to see you all soon. Oh, wait. May
Question.
just told me there is a question.
Okay.
Oh gosh. Okay, we're gonna answer it. We're gonna because we still got a few minutes. What are the requirements for skilled nursing?
Hmm. Well, that's a whole, I mean, that's a whole other level of care, past assisted living. So, um, if you can't be assisted by one person to transfer, which is kind of technical, transferring is getting up and from a seat and standing on your own, or with one person helping you pivot. Basically, it's if you can bear weight or not, when you're transferring from one position to another, or if you have extensive medical needs where you need nursing care. It's called skilled nursing for a reason. They have nurses. They bring you your medications. They help you get in and out of bed. They do all the bathing and all. It's a much higher level of care. So if you're in assisted living or if you're in independent living and you have care and you go beyond the point where they can assist you, that's when it's time to consider skilled nursing. And sometimes there are borderline cases where you might meet the criteria to move to skilled nursing, but you don't want to and you have the resources to stay where you are. You possibly can. There's no like hard and fast rules saying this person has to go to skilled nursing, this person has to stay. It's yeah. There's definitely
On
some
the
gray areas.
on the 10,000 foot view continuum, you've got independent living at one end, then you've got a few things in the middle, ALF, and then at the polar opposite is basically end stage utmost care skilled nursing.
Right.
And I think traditionally, when somebody thinks they have to go to a facility, I honestly think people just end up going like institution, facility, skilled nursing, and that's what they think about. So that's whole other level of care, but that's where all of these considerations earlier on, pre-crisis, might actually be able to keep you out of a skilled nursing facility.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So thank you again for
Question.
all your participation, everybody, and for joining us. And we will see you all on March 26th. Thanks, Norma. Bye-bye.